Speaking of Haas,
Okay.
I think that there's also a potential risk there that their honeymoon period is sort of over.
Ooh, I thought you were
Um,
going to say something like this.
because they obviously, well, the good news is that the car is stable and that their sort of greater competitiveness will probably make it easier for them to improve because they have some actual racing to get data
Yeah.
from. I mean, it must be pretty difficult to improve your car when you just have a car going around a track, and you need a sense of how it compares with cars close by and in genuine racing conditions. So that's good. That's good news, and obviously they're doing better, and it's fantastic to see them doing much better, like you say. The only issue is whether or not they can keep up with the speed of development, because that's going to be a really big thing this season, because people are obviously going to be getting to understand the new regulations better as time goes on. But they're surrounded by teams that may have a greater capacity to keep up with that speed of development, where it's unclear. I'm not saying they don't, but it's unclear whether or not they will be able to. There's a possibility that they might fall behind in that regard, not yet having the same level of funding as other teams around them. They did lack a certain presence in Australia. They didn't really make their mark in any meaningful sense. There was a point at which Magnussen was in P7, but that was just because he hadn't pitted.
Yeah.
And just overall, they didn't really look very racy. Mick Schumacher is kind of yet to really make an impact. I know he's been close to the points, but close doesn't really mean anything in Formula One. And yeah, they just looked a little bit sort of below average. It wasn't quite as bad as it had been. Maybe the track just doesn't quite suit them. I guess that's a possibility. But I'm a bit concerned with Haas that they've had this great coming out of the starting blocks and they've looked very good, and I'm happy for them. But can they sustain it? That's the question.
I'd like to think so. I think everyone would like to think so, but I completely appreciate the points you've made about actually they've done a really good job off the starting blocks. They've put the money in the right place. They've developed the car in the right way. But do they have the resources, the personnel, the funding to continue that development alongside the likes of Alpine, Alfa Romeo, et cetera, et cetera? That's where the question mark will be. Gunther Steiner did come out and say this weekend was a little bit disappointing. However, they were expecting to be on the back foot just to the nature of the circuit. It didn't suit their car, which is fine because actually not every race car goes perfectly around every track. There were races last year where the Mercedes was really dominant and the Red Bull was terrible and vice versa. So not every car fits every single track. As long as Haas know what tracks they're good at and how to capitalize on those tracks, and I think they're in for a good season. And also, they finished in 13th and 14th place this weekend on a track which they didn't favour. I'm looking forward to the races which have like a weird and wacky kind of situation, like Hungary when it started pouring down the rain a couple of years ago. And Kubica, did he manage to score some points? I believe for Williams. I think it was a fair few years ago. But
if we're talking about the 2019 Williams, that was in Germany.
That was in Germany. That's the one. But those kind of races where strategy's thrown up, Russia last year, and they can take risks, but because they're already in a respectable position, they might be able to capitalize on it and finish quite well in the points. Whereas last year, because they were stone dead last, by then capitalizing, they were only finishing 13th or 14th. But hopefully, being in that midfield pack, when they do hit that gold strategy, they will catapult themselves into the points, and that's what I'm looking forward to seeing Haas do, because they have had some bold strategies before, and they have worked. They've just been too far back in the grid to secure anything for it.
Yeah, fingers crossed they'll be able to keep up. We do know, of course, that they have a sort of better, slightly closer relationship with the Ferrari development as well, because they have their own some sort of annex to the design department at Maranello. So hopefully with Ferrari doing as well as they are, they might be able to capitalize on that understanding as well. We'll see. And we know that they have some talented people at the team in general. So fingers crossed, but they were definitely lacking in distinction in Australia. So as they claim, hopefully that is just due to the nature of the track, and they'll have to keep up the pace and understand their strengths and weaknesses.